Module 3, Lesson 18, we're going to learn about finding distance on the coordinate plane. So our first example is if we have opposite signs. So you look here, we have -2, 1, 5, 1. You ignore the one that's the same. So they both have y equals 1. So I'm looking at a -2 and a 5. This is a negative, this is a positive, so it's opposite signs. I need to find the absolute value of those numbers. Remember, absolute value is always positive. So the absolute value of -2 is 2, absolute value of 5 is 5, and we actually add those together. So if you look here on the number line, here would be our y-axis, this would be our x. We have a -2 here and the 5 here, and if you counted from one to the next, that would be 7 spots, which would be adding the 2 and 5. Here's your second example. We have a 3, -4, and a 3, 10. We ignore the one that's the same. You have -4, 10. This is a negative, this is a positive, but you want the distance between them. So we find the absolute value of both. We get 4 and 10. We add them together. We get 14. And the reason we add them is, again, here's my y-axis, here's the x. My -4 is right here. And then my 10 is here. And if I counted from my 10 to my -4, that would be 14 because I'm taking the 10 that are on this side. So this is 10, and this is 4. And then I'm adding 10 plus 4, and I get the 14. So the steps that you take when you have opposite signs that you're finding the distance between, first you ignore the number that's the same, you find the absolute value, and then the opposite signs, you add them together. So my -4 and 10 had the opposite sign, so I added them together. Again, they're also opposite sides, so that may help too. You see how the 10 was on this side, but then we had to go over the axis to get to that one. It was the same with this one. We had a 5 and we had to get over the axis and to get to the 2. So you're looking at opposite sides, so you add those together. So example 2, we're going to look at when both are positive. So they're on the same side of the one of the axes. So our y is here. 3 and 10 are on the right side. So I have a 3, 4 and a 10, 4, and they want me to find the distance between them. I ignore the one that's the same. These are both the same sign. So I'm actually going to subtract them to find the distance. So I find the absolute value of both of them, which is still positive, 3 and 10. And then I just subtract 10 minus 3. I find that it's 7 units apart. If you want to see for y as an example, I have 3 and 10 plotted. And if you count between them, it would be 7 places. Here's your next example. You have a 2, 1 and a 2, 8. We ignore the one that's the same. Now we're working with 1 and 8. They have the same sign. They're both positive. We find the absolute value, which gives me positive numbers still. And then you have an 8 minus 1, and that equals 7. So again, same signs. You subtract the numbers after you find the absolute value. And here it is on on the coordinate plane. This is an x. This one here is your y. They both are above. They're on the same side, and so you just would count between them. So again, the steps are to ignore the one that's the same, find the absolute value, the same sign or side, you subtract. Your last example is if they were both negative and you're wanting the distance between them. We have a -3, -1, -7, -1. We ignore the thing that's the same because they're both on the same side. So they're both y. It's not that there's a -1 on both of them because this could be -1 and it wouldn't matter. They both need to be the y's, or they both need to be the x's that are the same. I find the absolute value of the x's, so that's a 3 and a 7, and I subtract 7 minus 3. Here it is on the coordinate plane. So the steps are you ignore the one that's the same, find the absolute value. As long as it's the same sign and the same side, you subtract. So let's go ahead and go to the lesson in your book, lesson 18. It says 4 friends are touring on motorcycles. They come to an intersection of 2 roads. The roads that are on continue straight and the other one is perpendicular to it. The sign at the intersection shows the distance to several towns. Draw a diagram of the roads and use it and the information on the sign to answer. So we have one that's going left. You can see the arrow. We have one that goes north. We have another one that goes north, and we have another one that goes east here. So We have Albertsville is 8 miles to the left. I'm going to put an A and a -8 because it's to the left, which would be negative. I have Blossville, which is 3 miles north, which would probably be about right here. And that's a positive because it's north. And then we have Cheyenne, that's 12. I'm going to put a C for Cheyenne. And then Dewey Falls is 6 miles east, which would be positive. And I'm going to put a D for Dewey Falls. So there's my diagram of the roads. It says, what is the distance between Albertsville and Dewey Falls? So Albertsville and Dewey Falls. So if you look here, they're on opposite sides. They also are opposite signs, which means we find the absolute value and we add them together. So I have a -8 and a 6. I find the absolute value and add them together. And so that would be 14 miles. Also on here, you can see that from where Albertsville is to the axis is 8 miles. Where the axis is to where Dewey is 6 miles. So that's 8 and 6, which gives you the 14. Your next question says, what is the distance between Blossville and Cheyenne? Well, we have Blossville and Cheyenne right here. 3 and 12, they're the same sign. And remember, same signs we subtract. So we have to find the absolute value and subtract them. Positive numbers stay positive, so that's just 12 minus 3, and you get 9 miles. You also could count between them. Let's go to this next place here. It says, consider the points -4, 0, and 5, 0. What do the order pairs have in common? What does that mean about their location in the coordinate plane? Well, the y is 0, so that means both are on the x-axis. And the reason I know it's on the x-axis is because if my y is 0, we're not going up or down. So you could look at this like this. And if my first number is -4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then my second number is 0, I stay here. This one's a 5, so I'm going to go over 5. And then it's a 0, so I stay there. I don't go up or down. So what does that mean on their location? That it's on the x-axis. How do we find the distance between two numbers on the number line? We find the absolute value, and we add them together. And again, the reason that we're finding the absolute value, or the reason that we're adding, is because one's negative and one's positive. This one is 4 units away from 0. This one is 5 units away from 0, so you have 4 plus 5, that gives you 9. Now, they say use the same method to find the distance between 4 and 5, which is what I just did. Go ahead and look at example 2. It says, consider the line segment 0, -6, and 0, -11. Now, this is kind of the opposite as what we just did, because now our x is a 0, which means we don't go right or left. So on your coordinate plane like this, we have a -6, because it's 0, -6, so I'd stay at 0, go down, and then I'd stay at 0, and then I'd have to go down to a -11. So we're just looking at the distance here. So we would ignore those zeros and just look at my y's. It says, what do the ordered pairs have in common? What does it mean about the line segment's location on the plane? They're on the y-axis. And again, because they're both negatives, we're going to have to subtract them. So I find the absolute value of -11 minus the absolute value of -6, which would be 11 minus 6. And I get 5 units. Or you could count between them on the coordinate plane. My next one says, consider the line segments with the endpoint -3, 3, and -3, -5. So my -3's are the same. I ignore them. I'm looking at 3 and -5, both that are in the y. So this is a positive, and this is a negative. Therefore, I need to take the absolute value of both and add them together. That would be 3 plus 8. And again, if you are unsure, do your coordinate plane and plot your points. Negative 3, 3. 1, 2, 3. That's negative 3. And that would put me here. Negative 3, 3. Then you have a negative 3, negative 5. Negative 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Which would put me my point right here. Negative 3, negative 5. They're both on this negative 3 line. If I look here, from the line to my point, that's 1, 2, 3 places. From this line to this point, that's 5 places. So that's 5 plus 3, which gives you your 8. So what I need you to do is complete all the exercises, A through E, have me check them, and then I can move you on to your problem set.